Next up on stage, I would like to welcome Smyth from Shutterstock, who will be talking about art in the age of AI, decoding technology, protecting artists, and championing diversity. Louis is the director of product Generative AI tooling at Shutterstock and leads the build-out of generative image tools, in-house data models, and the recently launched AI-powered design assistant, bringing with him over 15 years of global leadership in product, R&D, and media. Louis has an academic background in languages and anthropology. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Come on in, take a seat. We're going to be talking about art and in the age of AI, so it should be interesting, fun, perhaps slightly less commercial than some of the pieces we've been talking about today. So I'm gonna start with a little bit of sort of how it works. This will hopefully be in an applied way and useful to what I'm talking about around the art angle. Then we'll talk about what it unlocks, what are the challenges, and how do we respond, right? But first, I want to talk about Shutterstock. So Shutterstock is, we'd like to say we're one platform, 734 million ideas. That's actually the number of images we have for sale at any one time. But that goes up every time I give this talk. But it's not just images we sell. We also sell music, 3D, video, etc. So have people heard of Shutterstock? Is this? Yeah. So okay, great. So you might wonder, why does Shutterstock care about AI? Why are we talking about it here today? And we've actually been doing AI for years. So the most notable example is that our reverse image search lets you take an image that you want to find the reverse of. And so you have a creative idea and it's like, I like this cat and it's on the background of a beach, and you upload that and we do a reverse search on our entire library. And that's a computer vision use case that has been live for quite a long time. But we also use it elsewhere. So we classify, score, and understand uploaded images. This helps us with our review process. So images come in. It helps us know, should we put it for sale on the website? And it also helps us optimize our search results. So people will add text to an image, but you can go one layer deeper in terms of understanding what the likelihood is of an image to perform well in a search. So in the last few years, and we've actually become one of the biggest data brokers in the world, because if you're looking for high quality, diverse data, if you're looking for hundreds of millions of pairs of text and image that are all fully licensed from the rights holders and available for sub-licensing, we're able to do that. And we also have our own AI image generator, so anyone can try that out on the site. That's a partnership with OpenAI, but it includes a lot of our own technology as well. And it lets you generate images that you're able to go ahead and download and license. So I'm going to talk very high level. How does it work? Well, anything digital, anything that can be represented digitally on a screen can also be conceived of as a mathematical artifact. So you have an image, you can break it down into pixels. Each pixel has a color value. Effectively, this picture of Abraham Lincoln can be conceived of as a matrix of large numbers. Words and semantic concepts can be given the same treatment. So to build a model, we can build an algorithm that connects images and semantic concepts via their numerical representations, and we can make predictions about that, like any other mathematical relationship. And we can train models that classify images in this way. So you can take lots of images, and the way you train it is you have the model make a prediction as to what semantic concepts are represented in the image. You tell it where it's correct, and you tell it where it's wrong, and then the model adjusts for the next iteration in order to try and do better. Now, in generative, we can actually do something very similar but backwards. So instead of going from image to text, for semantically classifying, we're going from text to image to generate. And what does that look like? Well, when we use that model, we call it inference. It's actually a multi-stage process. You're iterating. You start with noise, and so just like the black and white dots that you see on TV, and you have an input text, and you use the model to nudge the output image semantically closer to the input text, and you do that again and again and again. And after many cycles, you reach a point where it stops getting any closer each time, where it sort of moves around, but it reaches a limit, and that is then the output image. So what happens if you ask it for something that it has never seen before? Well, you might ask it for a unicorn, and we may never have seen a unicorn in any of our training set. In fact, often it'll do quite well. So if the unicorn is representable in a way that we have an understanding it's linked with concepts like horse and animals with a single horn, then we may actually be able to generate something that looks a bit like a unicorn. But in general, having a direct representation of what a unicorn looks like in the image training set will help with the output. So as a result, to build AI models, we need a huge amount of data and a huge amount of variety of that data. We have that data. We have it. Shutterstock has it. We have it elsewhere, obviously in the industry. And the result is that you can take these hundreds of millions and even billions of data points and combine them into a generative model and generate things that combine visual elements that have never been combined before. A horse made of seaweed, it may not be that novel, but it's, it can insert any concept there. You can combine elements that come from completely different eras or formats or contexts, like a robot painting a work of art. And you can also just generate generic, broad versions of things that already exist out there, but you're creating fresh flavors of them. So a luxury grapefruit cocktail. What does this actually unlock, right? What does this mean for all of us? So I took literally a few hundred of the most recent images generated on our image generator on Shutterstock, and it's wild. I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. It's the creative juice that comes out of this whole scene is unbelievable. There's variety, there's richness, there's creativity. People are experimenting, and there's, earlier I referred to how we have like 734 million ideas. It's infinite ideas, right? You can take ideas in any combination, any direction, and represent them. So it's quite hard to kind of get your head around this. And one way that I like to kind of conceive of this, so mathematically, it's latent space is a concept. So you have multi-dimensional space. Right, we're all familiar with the kind of two-dimensional space as a grid. Imagine like a grid, but instead of just two directions, you have many directions. And if we think of like the possible, the sort of, how big is this space? If you imagine a 10-character message, like a SMS, just 10 characters long, you have 141 trillion combinations, right? 141 trillion possibilities. If you're representing anything visually, the number of dimensions is much bigger. So the space is much vast, much bigger. So my preferred metaphor for just thinking about this is like the gas giant of potential content. So like Jupiter or Saturn or one of these huge planets. And your mission as someone exploring the space is to dive into that gas giant of potential content. So that sounds like fun, right? You want a picture of a cat? Great. There's like 100 quadrillion possible images of a cat that you can create. Like how are you even going to go about this? To navigate this, I think you need some special new equipment. You need a navigation spacesuit, some kind of tooling that enable you to explore this. You need some kind of like quality assessment goggles, right? You need some way of discerning noise, quality, something that's unique, something that's artistically useful, novel, reproducible. You need a map of where you've come from. You need that cultural context. You probably don't have a map of where you're going to because you don't know yet. And you probably need some kind of training to find your way around. This enables us to generate images that reflect reality. But it also enables us to generate images that mask reality. It lets us make images that mask the absence of reality, images that bear absolutely no relation to reality or unreality, and images that mash together reality and unreality altogether. So these are all ideas which philosophers in the 70s were sort of mulling over and suddenly are blasting out open into the real and available for anyone to use and play with. So the question is, if you can turn any concept, any string of words into a visual image, what could possibly go wrong? This all just sounds great, right? And there are some challenges. Because it creates big questions for us around things like authorship and intellectual property. It creates challenges around bias. It breaks down our understanding of truth and authenticity. It's something that artistic production and artists and the whole creative industry is going to have to adapt to. And then questions around identity really come into the play, especially around photoreal pictures of people and non-people. So here's a question. Who is the originator of this image, right? This is it looks like a yak. It's not a yak. Someone told me before, water bison maybe. It's with an oil painting, like a sort of flying god floating over a landscape. Someone typed in that text. There's a whole team of people who built a tool that was able to take that text and turn it into this image. But there was also hundreds of millions of images that went into the training of this. Each of those, there's at least sort of millions of humans that have contributed to that artistic production. And then you also have the hundreds of millions of humans who've written text that has been incorporated into language models, which have created some of the outputs that have enabled some of this technology. So where does the authorship lie? Where does the ownership lie? Who is this person? So this is an artificially generated image of a human girl. And it is based off of patterns that are seen on hundreds of millions of images. But again, this person per se does not exist. Did this happen? I don't know if people saw this. This was the Pope caught wearing a Balenciaga jacket, but of course he didn't. But did it even matter? Because it circulated in news and on media as if he did. And then what kind of biases do we reflect back in technologies like this? So what we see time and again is that when we take large amounts of training data, we end up getting biases and reflecting them back often even stronger in the outputs than they are in the original. And this can creates a challenge. It's something that everyone in the space does their best to mitigate against. So we will, even in Shutterstock, we will mitigate against bias around ethnicity, gender, age, and we will gently push to have underrepresented groups well represented and better represented. But it is not something that is easily solved. And part of the problem is that no matter where we're working, whatever data sets we're working with, we are taking in wider societal biases and inequality. And that's we have to work with. So how do we respond? Well, at Shutterstock, we are optimistic. So we do think that these challenges are all just sort of part of the package and surmountable or mitigatable. And we have a framework for responsible AI that we call Trust. So the first part is around training, that we train only on properly licensed data. We don't just like scrape the web and take anything we can find, anything we can see, and pull it into a model. We only work with content that has been properly licensed from artists. In our case, it's like photographers have uploaded the content, or with partners who have a similar kind of threshold of responsible training. We pay royalties to the artists that make this possible. So this is a sort of a tricky problem to solve. At the moment, the way we do it is we do it in aggregate. So we have a big pool that we call the contributor fund. And when people license AI-generated content from our site, we pay a royalty that otherwise would have gone to a photographer. Instead, it goes to this larger contributor fund, and that gets dispersed among all the contributors that have provided content that has gone to the training. We have this concept of uplift of underrepresented groups, and that speaks to some of the bias mitigation I was just talking about. We have safeguards on content produced, so you can't come on and make content that depicts something very violent or adult-themed or offensive, and we're transparent by default. And part of that includes making sure that if you generate content on our site, we make it very clear it is AI generated. We don't ever pass off AI generated content as being human generated. So just to talk a little bit more about how that payouts, the royalties work. So we are a two-sided marketplace. So the training set comes in from all our contributors. We build a generative model. We use that model and a ton of other tech around the sort of the interface and the orchestration, and we use it to turn an input prompt into an image, and then customers come along, they license it, and money goes into the contributor fund as a payout. So on the diversity front, one of the key things we're always keen to emphasize is that we are not all we still see a continued place for non-generative content, right? So these are all humans. These are something you don't often see in an AI-generated presentation. So these are all real models from our base of real human photographers, and we continue to see a role for them for the foreseeable future. So, and then as part of the transparency initiative, so we've joined the Content Authenticity Initiative, and there's a few other pieces out there. Really, these are problems that it's clear that we can't solve on our own. So we're working with partners in the industry in order to solve them together, because we need shared standards and shared expectations around how we talk about what we're doing. So if anyone in the audience is working on anything that they think can help us on that, please do come and talk to us. We'd love to work together. And that's it. Thank you. Do we have a minute for questions?
We do have time for questions. If there are any in the audience, feel free to ask. Yes.
Yeah, so the question is, how do we make it clear which images are AI generated? So there's a few pieces. The first thing is we don't allow people to upload AI generated images from someone somewhere else. So anything AI generated on our platform is coming from our own model. We make it very clear in the interface. So you got like sort of all the language around it. We make you tick a box before you download, saying, "I know this is AI generated," and we include it in the metadata, just sort of a clean IPTC tag. And we don't surface the results in search unless you specifically say, "I want to see AI generated images." Now, the watermarking, there is a plan to start watermarking with an invisible watermark that makes it clear that something it's something we're exploring, and we know there's some options coming online recently. So yeah.
Okay, maybe one or two short more questions. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so the question is, how do we update the training data to reflect the sort of what we're learning about bias? So there's actually, you've kind of two layers, right? So you've got the training data that goes into the model, and then you have mitigations that we put on top of the model, right? So it's a much slower cycle for the model, right? The actual data pipeline is much longer. It's multiple quarters often, or certainly months, and it's harder to kind of go back and clean that. So our emphasis currently is on like the mitigations that we put. So when you call the model, we will take your text and we will sort of, we are always giving you multiple options. So we have space there to kind of explore and add or change different prompts. Yeah.
Okay, maybe one last question in the back.
So the question is about removing yourself from the generative model, and the answer is that we are working with partners to iterate on those models, and we do have an opt-out clause. So we let you opt out, but we can't change history. So if you are opted in to licensing for generative AI, at a point sort of earlier and we sold that into a model, then we can't undo that. We can't take that out of the model. But when we're retraining the model, we would use the updated data set that is only the stuff that we now have rights to.